On to our next guest. Our executive spotlight this evening is Christian Giordano, and he is an architect, and he's the president of the firm Mancini and Duffy, and he's our executive spotlight tonight. He believes that the world of architecture and design is due for a reinvention, and he believes his team is the way to go about doing that. So welcome to the show, Kristen. It's really great to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about your firm.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm an architect, and really we've figured out a way of working with our clients differently from other architects. So with using technology, we've recreated the process. So we invite our clients into that process from the very beginning, from day one. They sit either in our computer lab here, an actual R&D lab that we've created in New York City, or we've adapted that for COVID so we can do everything virtually online. And you're immersed in our process immediately. So everything is done in 3D. We've essentially gamified architecture for our clients. So we begin using some artificial intelligence, some scripting languages on the back end, and we can start designing. So if you've got a restaurant that you want to lay out, you have a space in mind, we can quickly put you in this system. You can put on VR goggles, and we will begin to design that within minutes around you. And using that AI intelligence, we can lay out the tables. We can tell you exactly how many people are going to fit. We can tell you how big the kitchen needs to be by code. And all the while, it's building the infrastructure that's required per code. So the stairs, the elevators, the bathroom counts, things like that. And you walk away from our process within an hour or two with really a rough sketch and a rough idea of what it is that you can accomplish. Then we spend the next week or so refining that, actually beginning to conceptually design it, come back around to that client, and they come back into this system and they see it again. And by iterating this over and over again, we can do what a normal architect does in 3 months, we can do in 3 weeks time. It really moves that process along, and you're getting a rendering or a virtual experience or a walkthrough all right there, sort of free of charge in a sense, because it's a byproduct of how we're working.
That's amazing. If anyone has the chance, they should go to your website, the Mancini and Duffy website. You've got some just gorgeous buildings that you've created and some marvelous works that you've done.
Thank you.
Really, really inspiring. And I'm sort of an architectural aficionado. And so I really appreciate beautiful building design. And some of the stuff you guys have done has just been outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah, the firm's been around for 100 years. It was a firm that, I had come over about 10 years ago, and essentially through a few different happenings, I ended up purchasing the firm from the previous ownership. So myself and some other younger partners really saw that opportunity. It's funny when you ask, people that are close to that retirement age, hey, what do you think about retiring? And they say, well, make me an offer and I'll retire. It's funny how many people are actually looking to retire. I had no idea. I always tell, architects, approach your boss, ask them what their plans are. You might be surprised what you get out of it. And from there, we've recreated the culture. I mean, much similar to what Dave spoke about. We actually did hire a coach, a Vern Harnish coach. I'm sure you know who Vern Harnish is. And he took us through very similar exercises around culture and hiring and making sure that our purpose and our 30-year plan, our 10-year plan, our 5-year plan, our 1-year plan was really set in stone. And so that we had something to guide us. And that is really what led us through this process and discovering this technology.
Well, Christian, this is phenomenal. A few years ago, we gutted the whole building, the law firms in, and redid it and had an architect and everything. But I had a real hard time envisioning how the space would look, how to move. I don't do 3D envisioning it well at all. Some people do. To be immersed in it in a VR module would just be phenomenal. Like I just want to build something now to do it. So I can do that with you. So
put another project on our list, build a new building.
Yeah. So you do just commercial? Do you do residential? Do your clients come from
So
all
yeah,
over?
so we're mostly commercial. Mancini Duffy is known for commercial office interiors, frankly, but we're really a national firm. And over the last 5 to 8 years, we've really expanded our market sector. So we do a lot of hotels. We've even expanded into industrial and distribution, which is a hot market for us now. And there's some interesting problems to be solved there, and especially using the technology in those types of facilities really helps move that process along. And then, yeah, we do new buildings. We do some residential buildings. We don't do single family homes or things like that. It's usually a commercial type setting, but we've done many a law firm. And I can tell you along those lines that is, much of the reason why we created this technology is because for us, the architect can move pretty fast. The problem is getting those decisions and getting consensus along the way that holds a project up. So if we can get you all as the owners and as the decision makers to see what we're seeing right off the bat, then you're able to make those decisions. And as you said, it's hard. People don't visualize things. Even looking at a rendering isn't exactly as successful as being immersed into a 3D environment. And within this environment, you can move the chairs around, you can move the desks around, you can change the window sizes. I mean, there's all of these component parts are easily manipulated to create a better environment.
It's almost like playing that computer game, The Sims, but with VR. Dave, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, look, I love the conversation. Architecture is one of those things that transcends and really brings together a number of things, including math, science, art, culture. And so it's like a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'd love to know, Christian, what are maybe some of the greats that have inspired you? Maybe, one or two kind of the classics, maybe not currently living. And then maybe what are one or two that are living today that are really, doing some of the best work. Particularly, I love this notion of using technology, right, to advance the field even more, whether it's environmental or even through the use of new construction materials.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I don't get asked that very often. So I love kind of thinking about the history of architecture. So I would say that my favorite architect is a person by the name of Louis Kahn, who he probably died at least 20 years ago, maybe even more at this point, really known as a classical architect. He didn't do very many buildings, but he did some very significant ones. And one of them was the Salk Institute in California, in San Diego, and where Jonas Salk, hired him after creating the polio vaccine. And what I think gravitated me towards him was, in fact, this technology. He really thought about the building as a piece of technology and how those labs were to function. He's the first architect to create interstitial space, meaning space behind walls that you could go in and make modifications and changes to, thinking about flexibility. Hey, I build this building's going to last for hundreds of years. Why do I have to knock it down? Can I build in a certain amount of flexibility along the way so that people can adapt? As technology changes, well, the building can change as well. And that building still exists today and functions as a lab for the Salk Institute. And it's a beautiful building. And then current architects, there's an architect, Frank Gehry, who when I went to graduate school, I moved out to Los Angeles to be taught by Frank Gehry and ultimately work with him. He really is an advanced architect, and for someone who's probably now well into his 80s, is still the most revolutionary architect that's ever existed, doing buildings and forms that are unlike any other building you've seen. You've probably seen the Bilbao in Spain, the Guggenheim there. But again, he used technology to create these forms. So he would think of these forms, he would sculpt them out of clay or mesh or something in his studio. And then there was no way to get that vision into the computer, which is really the way we've been building for the last 20 years. So he invented a system to scan it and really created what's called a building information modeling. And that's a system that really all architects use today because of him. So he's had an impact on an architectural history point of view and an artistic point of view, but then also on how we actually perform our business.
That's amazing. Kenya, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. So I'm encouraged to hear that you're an architect. My daughter is 15. She wants to be an architect as well. And she's already taken engineering courses. So I'm super excited to just hear your story and your journey. And just really quick. So, obviously there's a lot of remote working that's going on right now. I see you've adapted in terms of like how you design in regards to COVID and the effects of that. How has your industry been affected? Right? That's the first part of my question. The second part is, have any of the design adaptations been altered in order to keep up with COVID restrictions or COVID compliance?
Sure. Great question as well. So the architecture industry, specifically in New York on the corporate side, has definitely been hurt. I'm not going to pretend. And, us here at our firm, we're about 75 people. We've been lucky because we're diversified in terms of the types of projects. So large projects that we're doing a tower in Times Square. It's a $2 billion project. It's too far along. We're 3 years into a 7-year project. It wasn't going to stop no matter what was happening. So thankfully, we've been good all along, and we made a commitment to our people here. We've spent 8 years at this firm, 9 years building this staff. The last thing we wanted to do was lose anybody. So we made a commitment to keep everybody's jobs. And thankfully, we've been able to get through this period, and we are busy again, which is great. Most architecture firms in the New York, New Jersey area are certainly picking back up, which is great news. We want everyone to do well. It means the market's doing well. But what I will say is for COVID, we've had to adapt the way we work. We are a very collaborative environment, especially on the design side. Designers need to get together. They need to touch and feel materials. They need to put materials together. We were doing projects. We were literally mailing, tile samples or brick samples back and forth to each other to compile things, and then taking pictures and mailing them to clients. It was a little crazy. Thankfully, we've adjusted the way we now come to the office. So there's heads down time, and then there's collaborative time. Going forward, though, it's really a bit of an unknown. We're seeing clients all over the place. So a lot of our corporate interiors projects, some of them have said in January, we're coming back and we're going to all be in the office 100%. Others have said, we really don't know what to do. We don't know where we're going to fit. I think we'll end up somewhere in between. I think we'll end up with a hybrid model where you're working from home a few days a week and you're coming into the office a few days a week. But it just means that the office environment has to be even more special. There has to be a reason to come to the office, not just for the people, but also your physical environment, the way you work. The technology now has to be seamless. We have to be able to do a Zoom call from our desk, from a conference room, from a huddle room, from all different aspects of the office. And it's actually an exciting time, I think, for the corporate office world. And I think what's different now is that before we followed a trend, sort of every company wanted to know what the other company was doing, and well, that's what we should do. We are finally back into a place where we can talk to the company and say, well, what is your culture? What do you want to do? What do your people actually do at work? Do they really need to be there? When they come to work, what do they need to do? How do they interact? And rather than following a trend, we can actually design an office space that works specifically for a company, which is, you'd be surprised, over the last probably 20 years, we just kind of replicate the latest thing that Google did, or in our case, we did Peloton. So what Peloton did, we replicated that for many clients. So it's a great time for the corporate office environment. Even though it's sort of a little bit on the downside, it's certainly coming back, which is great news.
That is good news. And I'm thrilled with the way that you use technology to take the profession a step forward. And we've worked with architects on occasion, and it's basically got the guy with the pencil behind his ear, right? And he's got these big rollout plans, and it takes 5 times longer than it was supposed to take. There's even the joke about the lottery winner who is an architect. And what are you going to do with the money? Well, I'm going to keep practicing architecture until the money runs out, right? So, but you've got a new system, an efficient system, and you're really bringing architecture to a whole new level. And I hope that this is, without losing your competitive advantage, at least some of these concepts are working their way into the profession as a whole, so that residential owners can also take advantage of some of these improvements. But
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, because if we ever build another house, like a retirement home, that's what I want to use. I want to get on that VR and start.
Yeah, absolutely.
it makes so much difference to be in the room, right? You get
Yeah.
a sense of the space, and does this really work? It could look great on paper, but everything that's shown to me on paper always looks smaller when it's actually built.
Yeah,
So I have no
exactly.
sense of what it's really going to be like.
Yep. Yeah, and there's no lying when you do this and when you work in this process, because we're using the actual space that we're going to be designing for you. I have we've had clients before that have wanted to market their space, and just as an example, in Jersey City, the owner said, "Hey, can you put the Statue of Liberty in this view? And hey, can you put it in this view? And can you put it in this view too?" And the next thing you know, all 4 views looking out all 4 sides of the building had the Statue of Liberty. With this process, you're in the building. There's no lying about where the Statue of Liberty is. We geomap it, and there it is, and that's your view, and we can figure it out from that point on.
Christian has graciously donated to Students to Science, that's the number 2, for being on the show as our executive spotlight. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Christian.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And you are listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventor Show with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart on WOR 710, the Voice of New York. We'll be right back.